welcome friends, family around the world. This is Michael Riley with OHMazing Entrepreneurs, and today's episode, if you have ever been interested in purchasing a business, we've got the guide for you. I'd like to introduce my guest, Cathy Miron from eSilo.
Hey, Mike. Great to be here.
Hey, tell us a little bit about yourself and the company.
Sure. So I'm the CEO of eSilo. We're a data backup and cybersecurity company. We help small to mid-sized organizations prevent situations like ransomware or other IT disasters. And we really do that in three ways. First is we help them prepare for those types of events, understand where their cybersecurity gaps and risks might be. Second, we help them with offsite disaster recovery plans and backups so that they always have a place to recover from. And then thirdly, we help with training, so educating their staff on all the things that they need to be doing to prevent those cyber attacks, and especially the C-suite and the board level. What are their responsibilities towards managing IT and cyber?
Strong product design. Love that. I'm a big fan of product. So, okay, so again, today's episode's about growing as an entrepreneur. Our tagline is real stories, shared growth, and excited to hear a lot about your story itself. And so tell me about it. So professional, I like to start at the beginning. So, tell us, I know a little bit about your story, but, circa where did you start professionally? How did you get there? How did you stumble into eventually becoming an entrepreneur and going about it a different route than I did? And I'd love to hear, where's a starting point for you?
Sure. So not sure if I'm going to go too far back, but when I was in college, I knew I wanted to be in business, but I didn't know what area of business.
Okay.
So the overachiever that I am, I triple majored in finance, information systems, and strategic operations management, which is a mouthful. And I knew that I wanted to do something sort of big and important. I actually thought I wanted to work at an investment bank. So I did an internship at Morgan Stanley my junior year. And instead of being on the banking or the finance side, they put me in a team called Straight Through Processing. And it was basically an automation group within their operations team. And we were using systems to automate a lot of very rote processes. And that is where I absolutely fell in love with the idea of automation and using technology to solve business problems, to make things more efficient, to make them more productive. So I went back to school my senior year thinking I'm definitely going to go down this IT track, this information technology side. Fast forward, when I graduated, I joined GE's IT leadership program.
Okay.
And the reason I went there was because I wanted to work for the biggest company, biggest name that I could find. And I wanted them to teach me how to be in the business world. I knew, the book side of it, book smart, but I had no street smarts. And I was incredibly fortunate because the program that I was a part of, they spent for the first 2 years, they put you in a cohort of 80 other people from around the world. They put us up in hotels. They gave us this amazing executive training,
Wow.
everything about, how to conduct yourself in a business setting, but then all these different aspects of technology, application development, project management, infrastructure. So it was a great intro. And then for the next 2 years, we had 4 6-month assignments. And that taught me enough about enterprise IT to say, I don't know if I want any one of these jobs.
Right.
So I went on afterwards, instead of finding a quote real job, there was another leadership program within GE, and GE's been very well known for their management training, called the corporate audit staff. And at the time, you got to think this was like 2003, 2004. So Sarbanes-Oxley was really huge, and you had the whole Enron scandal. So you had CEOs and CFOs needing to sign on the dotted line to the accuracy of their public company financials. And so at that time, we were just starting something called an IT audit department, where the auditors would go around to the different GE business units and assess their systems for accuracy, but also cybersecurity controls and business resiliency and a whole host of other things. And that's really kind of how I got this bug for being in more of a consultative, consulting type arrangement.
Right.
So for the next 5 years, I lived out of planes and hotels. I didn't have a home. I had a tax home
Right.
where I filed taxes. But it was the most amazing real world MBA I could have ever hoped for as a young professional.
Sounds like it.
I worked all over the US. I lived in Europe. I lived in Asia. I had a chance to be a manager at probably 23, 24. I was sitting across the table from CEOs and CFOs of companies that, had we spun them off at that time, they would have been Fortune 500s in their own right. And here I am telling them, your 2,000 person IT department is actually screwing up your Oracle implementation, and here's kind of why, and here's what we're seeing, and here's where we spend upwards of $150, $200 million on a large ERP deployment that would take 3 to 5 years to complete.
Right.
And then it would go live and have inaccuracies in reporting or issues with the data quality. So that gave me this amazing opportunity to really grow into big shoes in the corporate world around how do you run good enterprise IT, how do you ensure high quality data, high quality systems, and then manage all of that in a really secure way.
Right.
So after that time, I moved on to different jobs, but I always wanted to come back to that experience. And that is ultimately what I went to go look for when I went and bought my own business, eSilo, which does a lot of that type of consulting type work now.
Understood. And so give me a little bit of background on so 2003, 2004 is when you joined GE.
Yes.
And you went through a couple different intern programs, 6-month projects. So that's a couple years.
Yep.
And then you settled in on basically being one of the forming partners of when I say partners, you're kind of entrepreneured a department within GE to basically go to all the subsidiaries and say, hey, when we're looking at your systems, some of the implementations or ways you guys are going about collecting data and running the business is inefficient or just outright broken.
Yep.
And you have a system in which you can audit that. Did you learn that during your internship program?
No, it was, to be honest with you, we were putting it together on the fly. We were building audit plans on the fly. And I will always remember this story. My audit manager came to me and said, we need you to write an audit program for a new system implementation, like a new Oracle ERP. And I looked at it and I said, I've never seen an Oracle ERP before.
Right.
I don't know anything about how they work. How is it that you want me to put together a plan for how do I assess them for accuracy?
Right.
But I think challenges like that cause you to really do a lot of research, do a lot of homework, learn on the fly. And that's probably, if I took one thing away from that 5-year experience, it's that I learned how to learn very, very quickly and apply that knowledge almost immediately to add value to my client, the business, whoever I was doing work for. But it's funny that you highlight the fact that I was part of like a startup thing, right? A new thing in a multinational company, because all of the other roles I had at GE afterwards were also startups, new teams, and they call it intrapreneurship,
right?
Where you get to do something, very innovative, very creative inside with the support of the broader organization.
Right. I mean, I've read a few books on it, on entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily come outside. There's a strong argument for entrepreneurship to be like a title within a larger organization, right? So you're essentially starting something that doesn't exist yet. And, product owner or whatever, I know Toyota, basically when you have a model of a car, they're the entrepreneur, they own the car. So the person who is in charge or the general manager of that line of car basically is the top dog, and that's it. And so I jokingly say, if something ever happened to my business, like what job would I interview for? And my best title would be entrepreneur. And it sounds like it would be that for you too, because even before you had went out and started your own thing, you were crafting something that didn't necessarily exist. So you're like, how do I start something? Like, where's my note taking from that? There is no point of reference. So we need to figure out a system that kind of goes forward. Do you have any methodologies or anything that like you prep before you go into a project like that?
I wish I could say that I did.
Okay.
I also wish I could say that I have had the entrepreneurship bug my whole life, but truth be told, had a whole bunch of other factors not happened in my life and in my journey later on, I would still be working at that company and I would probably retire there.
Fair enough.
I think that some people are born to be entrepreneurs, and I think someone like yourself would be one of them. I think that I've always been somebody who plays it safe, who manages risk and makes sense. I'm in the risk management business right now. And it has been the kind of thing where if I get foisted into that type of situation, I can figure my way through it, but I need external factors kind of pushing me forward. And I think there's a lot of people in corporate that are feeling like that, where they know they can do something better, that is more in line with their values, that really excites them when they wake up in the morning. But I think a lot of us are kind of too good at the thing that we're already doing
Right.
to, take the leap.
No, that makes sense. And so how did you know, going back to, you're like, hey, I didn't necessarily always have the bug. And that's fair. It's a lot, for myself, I think about it, it's like I was always, my manager is doing a poor job of being my manager, or they're doing it wrong. But it's easy to sit back and like point fingers and be like, hey, he should be doing this, he should be doing that. But the reality is it's a lot different of a situation if you're there, because there's stuff that you can't necessarily see as a subordinate. So it's like, hey, I have external pressure here. I've got to make, from an entrepreneur's perspective, yes, we're building this product. I have to market it here. I have to sell it here. You're only looking at delivering it. So there's outside factors that you can't really appreciate until you get to it, or you don't necessarily see it until you actually start doing it yourself. And so it's easy to point fingers and say, hey, we should be doing it this way. But with the system, it's like, hey, we have to, with this ERP implementation, we have a specific business need or outcome that we're expected of it. So if we can sit there and build something, kind of define it, we can, have something we can build towards. You said that you were going from, you didn't necessarily have it. A few combination of events kind of pushed you towards the path of that.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable sharing some of the
Yeah.
information that kind of like led you to like, hey, I build stuff internally for a big company, and now I'm going to go out and do my own thing?
I will absolutely tell you, because I knew the moment that I needed to do something different.
Right.
So back in, I want to say 2013 or so, actually, let's go back even further than that. So 2009, I wrap up this corporate audit program. I knew I wanted an executive level job. So at the level that I had achieved in that program, it was an up or out program. So at some point you reach a ceiling and you have to go out and get a quote real job. And I knew I wanted to be the youngest IT executive in the company. And that was one of the things that because I was on this track, this leadership track, that was the expectation. So somebody came knocking on my door one day and said, we want you to be the director of IT audit for GE Capital. And at the time, Capital was maybe a collection of 20 or 25 different business units. We were bringing it together with a real headquarters function and building out the whole compliance and regulatory framework that kind of went along with that. And there's a lot of reasons why, but the short answer of it is right after the financial crisis, there was a ton of financial regulation that came out. And GE Capital at the time was deemed a SIFI, so significantly important financial institution, so too big to fail. And so we needed to have, a big, robust compliance and audit framework and team to keep the business lines in check. So I didn't necessarily want to be a career auditor. I didn't think that was necessarily my calling. I like the consulting side of it, not so much the audit. Like, hi, I'm here from corporate and I want to audit you. But I took that job and it turned out to be an amazing opportunity. But you can only be in an audit function for so long before you get kind of pigeonholed and labeled and put in a box. So I did that role for a while, and it gave me the foundation that I use in my business most today in terms of helping regulated businesses understand their obligations and how to be secure and build resilient systems. But afterwards, I got tapped on the shoulder to go to corporate one day, drive up to headquarters. And if you've ever been in Connecticut, the Merritt Parkway is a tiny little 2-lane highway, and it was connecting our two offices. So I had about 20 minutes to get up to headquarters, and lo and behold, there was a big accident. So I'm late to meet. The person that they had set me up with was the Chief Information Officer of GE. So the CIO for GE parent, GE overall. I thought I was just going to do like a meet and greet as part of, getting to know some of the up-and-comers, and then, ultimately putting them on the radar for future jobs and things like that. So I walk into her meeting late, to her office, and she sits me down, and so we do like the pleasantries, and then she says, okay, here's your new team. And I was like, what?
What?
She put an org chart in front of me. this is your new job. This is your new team. This is what you're going to be responsible for. And I was going to be a CTO at the
Oh,
company.
wow.
And truth be told, I was incredibly, honored to be given that opportunity, but I did not feel qualified for that role at all in the least bit. I'm not a technologist by trade. I was never a developer. I was never in infrastructure. And at GE and in large enterprises, the CTO office tends to be the ones that are responsible for the underlying infrastructure.
Right.
And within IT, I always wanted to be more on the business-facing side. I want to sit with the business and understand what the problem is, and then work with the technology teams to create apps and automation and things that solve that problem. So it was kind of the wrong side of the function was the way I was looking at it.
Right.
And I said, I don't know anything about mobility, communication, voice, video. So I was going to be responsible for all of the collaboration and productivity tools for the company, as well as the mobile platforms, including mobile security, but mobile devices in general. And so I walked out of that meeting thinking, wow, it's great to get tapped on the shoulder for something, but this is really intimidating.
Right.
And I spent the next year in that role, stressed out and under pressure every single day. And I think that's a perfect example of you can get the title and the salary, and I had a $100 million budget. I had the 300-person team. 60 of us were core employees, and the rest were contract staff.
Right.
But I had all of these external markers of success. Why wouldn't you be happy to have that job at, I don't know, I was probably 29, 30.
Right.
But every night I would come home and cry because I was totally overwhelmed.
Right.
And I distinctly remember there was one day I went into the office. So I am a night owl. I do not get up early. I am not an early riser, although I am now. Now that you know me,
what?
I got up at 6. I left the house at 6 a.m. this morning to go to the breakfast that you and I were just at.
Yes,
but I was in my office, and this is back when everyone drove to the office, at 4:30 in the morning on my second cup of coffee. And I was having my team come in at 6 a.m., then 6:15, then 6:30. I was doing one-on-ones with my team. And that's what my day looked like. And I had to be there that early because I had so much on my plate and so much pressure. I remember at the time I was working on a project around employee experience and how do we modernize all of our technology. And I think they were either monthly or quarterly meetings with the chief people officer, the CIO, chief communications officer for GE overall.
Wow.
CMO as well, the chief marketing officer. And so I wanted to do a great job, but I always felt like I was, scrambling to do more, do better, figure out how to juggle all these things. Plus, fill in some of the gaps in my technical knowledge that I didn't, feel particularly strongly about. I was a little self-conscious about my technical skills. So that is when, in that job, I struggled through that for a year. I knew that I needed to do something else because the path that I was on, and even the job that I was in, was amazing for so many different reasons, but also not best matched to my strengths and where I wanted the rest of my career to go. And when you look around and you see that you don't want your boss's job or your boss's boss's job, and you're not quite sure, where else to move within a company, I think that gets you starting to think. And still at that time, though, I would have never told you that I would be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to change, but I didn't know what kind of change. So I thought, maybe different function, different company, different, area of technology in the same company. But it took my husband leaving. So him and I both worked at the company.
Okay.
He left for an amazing job opportunity down here in Florida.
Okay.
It took him leaving and us moving to Florida, and I went 100% remote, for me to feel, a bit more disconnected from my peers, from the projects that I was working on. I'll tell you that before we moved, I was on the project to move GE's headquarters from Connecticut to Boston. And so GE had been in Connecticut for 40 plus years, but it's very suburban, and at the time we had a big push for more digital platforms, digital transformation, and we needed to be in a metro area where we could attract talent, where we could be involved in what we call the digital ecosystem.
Right.
So the company had put together a team of 8 people, one from each function, and I was the representative for technology to work on the headquarters migration. And that was everything from a brand perspective, what do we want it to look like and feel like, to how do we want to design the buildings. And then my role was what kind of technology, what kind of impressive technology would be put inside headquarters so that when you had heads of state or, the CEOs of major corporations coming in, our technology was like right in their face.
Right.
So think, wall size touchscreen boardroom. And this was, 10 years ago.
Right.
And so that was the project I was on when I told them I was moving to Florida. And they said, great. Do you want to be on a plane to Boston every week? And at the time, my daughter was about 9 months old. And I said, thank you, but no thank you. And so I stayed with the company, but I went remote and I worked on projects that were nowhere near as cool as that.
Right.
So that was, to me, like the beginning of the end. When I knew I was going to have to do something different for my career, I knew I didn't want to stay at home with my children, but I needed to find a better way to balance my home life and my work life. Right.
And normally I lead into like the fear and the uncertainty of entrepreneurship is kind of like a driving factor. But I would argue that you're, being the CTO of a Fortune 10, it's Fortune 10, right? A Fortune
At the time, not anymore, but yes.
A very multi-billion-dollar company, and having to, because part of all this is, hey, not 100% sure, but we'll make it work. And, and having that drive, but it's a lot different when you have a team of 300. So
it's, I would have never taken the leap if there weren't these other factors. And, what was kind of on the other side that helped me get over that hump was my family. And my whole career, I had been, addicted to work, and that was my identity. And that was how I felt my sense of achievement and accomplishment. And for the first time ever, when I got home, I didn't want to think about work. I just wanted to play with my baby.
Right.
And I just wanted to do something else. And so, that shifting of priorities, I think, was a big motivator for me. And the other thing that I think was helpful was having been here in Florida for a year, working out of my home office, talking to everyone on video. Now, post-COVID, we all do that. But at the time, it was, very antisocial, very unusual.
Right.
And I said, I have no friends here. I don't know anybody.
I relate to that.
Yeah.
So, well, I know people, no friend. No, I'm just kidding. But
and so I thought, if I'm going to stay here and we're going to plant roots here, because we love the area, I don't think I'll ever leave Florida, I need to have a business and a career that connects me to the ecosystem where I live.
Okay.
And so that was one of the things that kind of got me looking around to say, well, what are the opportunities? And where I live up in Jupiter, there's not a lot of large companies. There's no Fortune 10 companies operating, where I am. And so it would mean driving down to Miami every week. And when I first moved, we had just opened an office in Miami right by the airport, and I was making that commute every week. And it was horrible.
Yeah.
And so I knew that if I wanted to do the big corporate thing, I couldn't do it from where I was. And at the time, remote wasn't so common. Right now, everybody is remote or hybrid.
Right.
So that's when I decided, well, I'll have to go buy something. And therefore, I can control my work schedule. I can control where I work from. And that'll be it.
So the buying process, I guess, where'd you start? How it's because I get what you're saying. Am I going to find something that's going to be satisfying for me as a professional? That's parallel to what I'm currently doing. That's around me. If there's nothing available, then what's some alternatives to hit that mark? Hit that. Where I'm building something where I feel like I'm a part of. I'm impactful. So I guess building a business. If I want to buy a business, what am I going to do?
Where do you start?
Yeah.
You read the Harvard Business School book on it.
They have one. Of course, Harvard has a book on it.
So I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but when I was at GE, somebody was testing a new learning management system, and there was some content in there, and they were like, "You just, give me your thoughts." And having led an employee experience project, they wanted to know, what's the employee experience?
Right.
So I'm browsing through the catalog, and I saw this it was like an audio clip on how to buy a business. I thought, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I listened to the 15, 20-minute talk. It's Harvard has 2 professors that teach this course. I don't know if they still do. This was a while ago, but and then they put out a book that kind of summarizes the takeaways from the course. But I listened to that 20-minute clip, and I was hooked. I went out and bought the book, devoured it cover to cover, and the gist of it is especially, so it's geared towards MBA grads.
Okay.
Right. And so instead of starting something from scratch and going through those first couple of years where things are really lean and you're building something from nothing, if you are experienced and you can raise money or have money, you can go and buy a business and run it and make it better, like apply all your MBA training to make it better.
Right.
And so I thought to myself, well, I basically have what I consider to be a real world MBA from all the travel and all the work that I've done in
I would agree.
healthcare,
At least an MBA. Yeah.
healthcare, financial services, energy,
Right.
aviation. I mean, GE had a business in every sector pretty much. And so so what they tell you in the book is look for boring, unsexy businesses because those are the things that are going to have steady cash flow, are going to be in demand regardless of what the economy is doing, recession and things like that. So it's not as cyclical as other industries. It's not, what's hot right now.
Right.
And they use examples of like music instrument rental to schools or porta potties or, making, I guess, like pipe fitting, pipes and screws and stuff like that. So I didn't want to go like that far.
I mean,
out my
porta
domain.
potties is appealing,
Apparently, there's a lot of good recurring
I'm
revenue.
I'm in the shit business. So. What do you do for a living? Glad you asked.
I was like, what would my colleagues think of me?
Right.
What are you doing now?
Yeah, it's a big business. No, but okay.
So I read the book, and one of the takeaways was you look at the business search process almost as if it's its own job. And that there are brokers that can help you find a business for sale. So what I didn't know is that there's a business MLS, just like there is a residential MLS to go buy homes.
Sure.
So I went out, found a broker. I actually thought that they have a reputation for being a little sleazy. So I went to my banker and I said, I don't want the sleazy broker. Give me like the good one, the one that I can actually trust. I've never done this before. And they recommended me a great broker who you'll actually probably meet at some point soon, and I'll tell you why later. But and he helped me look at a whole bunch of different businesses. And I wasn't dead set on technology, to be honest. I thought I might have needed to break from IT and technology. All the things that I felt were overwhelming.
Right.
But I knew that I wanted something with recurring revenue that had existing customers, that had a strong business model, and something where I could actually get excited about it. I could be passionate and apply my skills. So I looked at a whole bunch of different businesses, and ultimately I landed on eSilo.
Awesome. We're going to pause right here 1 second because we are a fledgling podcast. We are building up, do a quick ad read through, and then we'll come back and talk about what it was like to take over eSilo. So question, are you expanding and onboarding is onboarding starting to become a challenge? Are you concerned about security but have no idea where to start? Are you considering hiring IT staff to handle your growing technology challenges? Look no further than OHMazing Tech, your one-stop solution for your fully virtual IT department. With OHMazing Tech, we specialize in creating a stress-free onboarding process for your new users. Once onboarded, leave the technical stress of managing your environment to us. Our team of skilled experts is dedicated to keeping your systems running smoothly 24/7. Focus on what you do best while we handle your technology needs. From VCIO services, technology procurement, and CR management, we handle it all for one low monthly rate. Experience the ease of managed IT services with OHMazing Tech. Visit our website at OHMazing Tech. That's OHMazing.tech. Transform your IT worries into amazing results. And that's it. And Cathy, tell me a little bit more about going back to your story. We went through a business broker, not someone not sleazy, then find something boring. I jokingly say that backups is so boring. It's so required, but it's because I've seen a bunch of I know backups, and I know my biggest question for backups is, do they work? Can I restore from them? And if because I've been in situations where it's we got a backup, we go to restore it, it doesn't work. So that's a nightmare. But from a day-to-day aspect, it's oh, you're totally right. But it's so required because people who lose 60% of businesses that lose their data go out of business within 5 years. So that's a statistic that I kind of harp on. I push it. I'm you guys have got to pay attention to your data because if you lose it, you're done. So you bought it. Tell me about the experience, onboarding. When did you buy it? How long it had been open?
Yeah.
Tell me all about it.
So I bought the business in 2018.
Okay.
I would say it probably took me maybe 6 months from the time I started my search to ultimately settling the deal.
Okay.
I was actually under contract to buy another business, and then this kind of came across my desk, and I decided, you know what, let me pull out of that and get into this, because this was actually a lot more attractive and a lot more in aligned with my skills.
Gotcha.
But since this episode is about buying a business, I don't want to skip too much over the due diligence process itself, because I think that a lot of times people will look at another company or get approached, right? I think you and I being in technology space, we get approached to get acquired all the time.
Right.
And there's definitely a lot of things that I thought I knew that, the book covered, but it also, no book kind of covers everything. Right. So what I would tell you is that when I was shopping, I was obviously looking at financials and trying to
auditing them.
That was exactly the thing. I was like, well, I'm an auditor. I know how to go through all of this. I know how to tick and tie and
right.
Look for fraud and,
right.
and those types of things. So I actually did the financial review myself. And I hired a CPA to essentially advise me. So she would tell me what to do and I would go and do it, because I was trying to save a little bit of money.
Right.
And I thought, I know how to do this. In retrospect, I would have actually just hired a CPA firm that specializes in valuations and had them do it.
Right.
Not because I found anything, fraudulent or anything like that when I bought the company, but because they would have asked deeper questions than I had. And so I was looking at, 3 years of financials and kind of like, oh, okay, everything literally ticks and ties and adds up.
Yes.
But they would have asked about trends and looked at ratios and kind of how did that compare to competitors. And I would have walked into the front door of my new business with so much more insight.
Gotcha.
And so much more strategy and kind of planning.
Gotcha.
Whereas I just sort of, walked in and winged it.
Right.
And it worked out okay. But I want people to learn, from things that I would have gone back and done differently or done better had I done it over again.
So does the seller actually hire one to kind of do theirs? They're like, hey, you know what? Evaluate our business. We're approaching this place where we're looking at exiting, our position here at the company, right? So pad the books, make it look as I tell the accountant, I don't know how you got to do it, but just make it happen, right? So and then they take that report and then they give it to your guys and you guys compare.
It's going to be different depending on the size of the company that you're looking to acquire.
Okay.
Because we did this bootstrapped, I didn't go out and raise, money from someone else. And so it was all debt that I took on. I used my portfolio to finance a loan to make the acquisition. So we were looking at, smaller companies.
Right.
And so, yes, sometimes there'll be audited financials, but a lot of times it'll just be CPA prepared, financial statements. Right. What I will say is that, kind of to your point about like padding, I think it would be really, you don't want to be buying a business from somebody who's a flat out liar or a fake.
You don't lie, but it's just like.
But everyone wants to, put their best face forward.
Yeah, if you're going to do it, make it look as
good as possible.
Absolutely.
So what I had realized was that they had really slimmed down staff over the couple of years when they knew they were going to start to exit and the business was a bit of a cash cow. Yeah. So their expenses were really, really low. And there was also some family members that they had as on the books who had technical skills and who were involved much earlier in the business, but in the later years, not so much. And so, an example of a learning that I discovered is, as I walked in the door, I said, we need more people to run this well.
Yeah.
And to invest properly in the technology and everything else. So, that was an example of the way that they were running it versus the way that I was going to run it was totally different. So my expense profile looked different when I took over. And a CPA probably would have helped me, figure out some of those things ahead of time. But what I will say is that usually the seller's going to have a broker also. So they're going to be working with somebody who helps them prepare the financials, who helps them anticipate the kinds of questions that get asked. And as a part of the buying process, you usually negotiate due diligence.
Right.
And I think they had wanted me to do it in 30 days or something. And or maybe it was I think it was 2 weeks, and then I negotiated for 30 days.
Of course they wanted you,
faster, the better.
Yeah.
I can't make a decision, this big, this life-changing in such a short amount of time. So don't be afraid to go ask for what you think you really want.
Gotcha.
And surround yourself with the right experts. But that's definitely, it's probably a whole show in and of itself. And I can actually recommend a great business broker to come on and share kind of what that process looks like.
Because, this is, so expanded. It's so like when I opened my own business, I was like, I'd never even thought to buy one, or should I franchise it? Or, there's a ton of different ways. Like probably starting fresh is probably the most common and the most natural, probably the worst, because, you as opposed to buying
Like
something
the failure rate and just the
it's
difficulty.
just difficult because when, especially eSilo has been around since, what was it? When was it established?
2002.
So 2002, you purchased in 2018.
Yeah, I was 16 years old.
years old. So like they've matured, like there's a certain, maturation process in which you go from like 2002, the first 5 years, getting your first 5 clients, making a ton of mistakes, doing a big portfolio of stuff and realize, hey, I can't do anything real well unless I scope it down and start deciding what I want to do. Yeah. And you learn, when you buy a business, you buy a lot of that experience. And as long as you don't mess it up, so to speak. And I think that's...
So that's literally the first piece of advice I got. Yeah. And it was like kind of, as the broker's like handing me the keys and he's walking out the door, he said, the one thing I want to tell you is don't break what you just bought.
Right.
So I had all these ideas. I was super excited. I was very ambitious. And he said, just spend a couple of months like watching and learning and asking curious questions. Don't rush to try to put your mark on something right away because you may not fully understand the impact or kind of why things are the way that they are. And I thought that was great advice.
I 100% agree. Question, and this is kind of because I know you personally, you have a business coach.
I do now, yes.
How is that, on board? Because I've seen a bunch of them, right? And so, like, how's that experience been for you? And what would, what would you say that, what are signs that you potentially may need one?
So the first thing I'll tell you is that I wish I hired one earlier. When I got help early on, but I got help in different areas. And over the course of the last 6 years, I've had, I think now 3 or 4 different coaches because it kind of matches the season of where I am with the business.
Right.
The first person that I actually hired was a marketing consultant, whether you want to call her a coach or whatever. I'm a very analytical, rational person, and I realize that people buy on emotion, and that is not a core strength of the way that I communicate. And so I hired her to help me, like teach me how I should be communicating, telling stories and things like that.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And
oh my gosh.
And then write all my website copy for me. So that was kind of the the first big investment. But specifically, you asked about business coach. I ultimately decided to hire one. I'm just kind of thinking back because I was feeling overwhelmed all the time, trying to run in 5 or 6 different directions. And I'm one of those people who always says yes, who always takes on more. And I was trying to figure out, well, maybe like I should pull back on different things, whether that was volunteer work or business, different methods of business development, or even like product lines and services. And so I was really kind of struggling with some of that. So that was the first business coach that I hired. And I don't know if I would call her a business coach, but high performance coach was kind of the
right.
And so it was a healthy bit of work on myself and how do I prioritize? How do I value my time? How do I carry forward old thoughts and values around everything from work ethic to money to perfectionism? I mean, you name it. Like, how does the way that I was raised and the experiences that I had in the corporate world, how is that affecting me in my business, but maybe not in ways that I would want? And a perfect example I would give you is that in a corporate setting, when you manage a cost center, and they literally called it a cost center, you're all about cutting expenses. And so you're given a budget and you have to decide how to spend it. Well, when you run a business, the most important thing isn't the cost management, it's revenue management, it's sales, it's the top line. And I was never responsible for that before.
Amen.
So that's the mindset shift, right? Of coming out of corporate and coming into business. And so, things like that, I was very aware that I needed to think and act differently, but I was having trouble kind of like rationally, I knew that, but day to day, as I was making decisions and sort of setting the priorities for the team, I was having trouble with that. So that was my first coach that I brought on. I think we reached a point where everything that she was well equipped to help me with, we kind of hit a plateau. And so I went then and thought about, okay, well, what do I need right now? And it was financial and operational discipline. So for someone who helps companies with, hey, here's how you can use technology. Here's how you can standardize process. Here's how you can be efficient. What do they say? Like the shoemaker's kids don't have great shoes.
Right.
I was struggling with a little bit of that inside myself. And so I went to a Chamber of Commerce presentation, and I saw this amazing guy get up there and say, we have a really simple formula for how we kind of manage everything from like the revenue line all the way down to your net profit. And for the first time, it was such an easy framework where I could make the mental leap between what the numbers financially ultimately look like and how that translates into operational activities that happen every day, every week, every month, in terms of like how many leads, how many conversions, how many, all those types of things. And so I was like, I'm going to go hire that guy. And but I probably waited about another year before I actually reached out to him and said, I want to have a conversation about how you can help me because I'm really, really struggling. And so, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are so skillful and resourceful that, we say, oh, well, we'll just, figure it out. I'll read more books or I'll listen to more podcasts and I'll figure it out. And I think the value of just having an experienced person who does this for hundreds of people, looking at what you're doing from the outside in, right? Because you're too close to it.
Right.
And being able to say, if you change these 2 things or 3 things, it would be potentially a game changer for you. So that to me is the value of having a business coach.
We're running. I've got 2 more questions for you, and you brought up one point that I have to ask as an avid book reader. You have any you recommend?
Yes, I'm trying to narrow it down right now.
Understandable.
I would say Who Not How, for me personally, has probably been one of the most impactful.
Gotcha.
The One Thing is another. And just the beauty of The One Thing is kind of asking yourself the clarifying question, like, what's the one thing I can do right now that would make this problem I'm trying to solve or this goal I'm trying to accomplish easier, or all of the other obstacles irrelevant?
Right.
And so for someone who likes to do lots of things, as I just said, it really helps focus me down. So I think those are probably the 2.
Gotcha. And to our listeners, first, if you could give one piece of advice for someone who is looking to possibly purchase a business that we haven't already gone over, what would that piece of advice be?
So when I was looking, my primary filtering criteria was the company's financials. And everybody told me, don't just do it based on financials, because there's going to be one day where the financial situation isn't so good, or you're, struggling, something went wrong at work, and you're going to be like, man, this isn't what I thought it would be. This isn't what excites me anymore. Pick a business based on your passion.
Right.
And I could not for the life of me understand why people were saying that. Because I thought, well, if the business makes a lot of money and it's really successful, then I'm going to be happy because I've accomplished, the things I wanted to accomplish. Yeah. And so I wish I had spent a little bit more time trying to figure out what I was passionate about. Would it have changed what I'm doing right now? No, not necessarily, because I am actually passionate about what I'm doing, helping small businesses. But I think I would have had a better understanding of my own values and what's important to me, and that would have helped me with some of the mindset things that I didn't really address until I had a coach, 3-4 years later.
Understood. And we're going to talk more about your business in our next episode. So, Cathy, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about, your experience purchasing a business. This has been insightful for me. All of your socials. Tell us where can we find you? Go ahead and audibly give it, because I was going to say they're going to be on the YouTube in show notes, but might as well just say it out loud just in case.
Sure. So anybody who wants to have a confidential conversation with me about their cybersecurity or the business buying process or really anything else can find me at meetcathy.com. And then I'm always on LinkedIn. So if you find me at cathymiron.com, it'll shortcut you to my LinkedIn page. I do a lot of helpful tech tip posts and videos.
You're an excellent follower. Yeah.
Thank you. And then the last thing I'll say is I do have a budding YouTube channel. So if you went to eSilo.com/YouTube, it'll take you there. I've got a bunch of videos, short ones, long ones, full-on training presentations.
Oh, beautiful.
Everything you want to know about backup, cybersecurity, how to protect your business.
Oh, I'm going to like and subscribe myself. So, by the way, that's Cathy with a C.
Yes.
Yeah, So meet Cathy with a C. So in any case, looking forward to our next episode. It's going to be a deep dive into why the SMB should understand and think about compliance, security, and data backups. With that being said, thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of Amazing Entrepreneurs. Once again, my name is Michael Riley, here with Cathy Miron, and we thoroughly enjoyed our time with you. Thank you. Have an amazing week.